Mark stood in the front yard, wearing his usual pale orange vest and work boots. His short black curly hair was damp with sweat, and sawdust clung to his arms. It was another long day, but he didn't mind. This house wasn't just another job. It was their home. The one he was building for his wife, Melissa, and her two kids, Liam and Hannah. The sun was low, casting a soft light on the wooden frame behind him. The house was starting to take shape. The walls were up, the roof was on, and the inside was finally starting to feel like something real. Mark wiped his forehead and looked back at the house with pride. A small white car pulled into the driveway. The doors opened, and out came Liam and Hannah. Liam wore a plain white shirt and gray pants. His blonde hair fell neatly across his forehead. Hannah, dressed in a jeans jacket and jeans pants, followed close behind, scrolling on her phone. "Hi," Liam said, barely looking up. He walked past Mark without stopping. Hannah gave a small wave, her eyes still on her screen. "Hey, kids," Mark replied, trying to keep the warmth in his voice. "I finished the treehouse stairs today. Want to check it out?" Liam glanced up briefly. "Maybe later," he said, walking toward the front steps that weren't even painted yet. Hannah didn't say anything. She just kept walking. Mark stood there for a moment, holding a toolbox in one hand. He watched them go, a quiet look crossing his face. He wasn't expecting hugs or big thank yous, but sometimes he wondered if they saw him as more than just some guy fixing boards and hammering nails. Inside the unfinished kitchen, Melissa stood by the makeshift counter, unpacking groceries. She smiled when Mark came in. "It's coming together," she said. "You've done so much already." "Yeah," he said softly, placing the toolbox down. "Just need to finish the cabinets this week." She walked over and gave him a kiss on the cheek. "They're going to love it. Just give it time." Mark nodded, but his eyes went to the living room, where Liam and Hannah were already setting up their tablets and snacks, barely glancing around at the walls he spent hours building. Outside, a man walked by with his dog and waved. "You the contractor?" Mark hesitated, then smiled and said, "Yeah, something like that." The man nodded and kept walking. Mark turned back toward the house. He didn't say it out loud, but he hoped that one day, when the dust settled and the rooms were painted, Liam and Hannah would know the truth, that he wasn't just building them a house. He was trying to build a place where they could feel safe, loved, and maybe even call him Dad. But for now, he kept working, holding on to that hope. The next morning, Mark was up before sunrise. He quietly made breakfast in the kitchen corner they had set up with a folding table and a small stove. The house wasn't finished, but he liked these quiet mornings. Eggs sizzled in the pan as he heard footsteps upstairs. Melissa walked in first, still in her robe. She smiled when she saw the food. "You spoil us," she said, rubbing her eyes. "Just making sure everyone starts the day right," Mark replied, placing 2 plates on the table. A few minutes later, Liam came down the stairs. He was wearing the same white shirt and gray pants he always liked. He sat down and grabbed a piece of toast without saying much. Hannah followed right after, her jeans jacket half on, eyes already on her phone. "Got school today?" Mark asked, trying to make small talk. "Yeah," Liam said without looking up. "Don't forget your science project," Mark added. "I saw the paper on the kitchen counter. You want me to help check it later?" Liam shrugged. Mom already looked at it. Mark nodded and took a sip of his coffee. After breakfast, Mark drove the kids to school while Melissa stayed behind to clean. The drive was quiet. Hannah had earbuds in. Liam stared out the window. Mark tried again. "You know, when I was your age, I built a volcano for a science fair. Real smoke and everything." Liam turned slightly. "Cool." Mark smiled. "Yours is better, though. I saw the way you drew the ocean layers. Looked sharp." Liam gave a small nod but said nothing more. When they reached the school, both kids grabbed their bags and got out quickly. Mark leaned across the seat. "Have a good day, guys." They didn't respond. They just walked toward the building. As Mark pulled away, he passed a group of parents and kids gathered outside. One of the boys pointed toward Mark's truck and whispered something. Liam looked over his shoulder and muttered, "That's just the guy working on our house." Mark heard it through the open window. He didn't react. He just kept driving. But the words echoed in his mind. Just the guy working on our house. Later that afternoon, Mark was back on the roof, fixing a vent. He worked quietly, focused, but his thoughts were heavy. He remembered Liam helping him paint a bedroom wall last month, laughing when they both got paint on their clothes. That moment felt real. But now it felt far away. When Melissa came outside with a sandwich, she noticed his face. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," he said. "Just tired." She sat beside him on the porch step. "They'll come around." He looked at her and nodded slowly. "I know. Just wish they saw me." Melissa squeezed his hand. "They will. Someday." Mark gave a small smile. He didn't say it, but deep down, he hoped that someday would come soon. For now, he would keep building. The house, the family, and the hope that one day they'd call him more than just the guy working. One afternoon, Mark stopped working and wiped sweat from his forehead. The house was almost done, but there was still plenty to fix. He heard the sound of kids playing nearby and looked toward the street. Liam and Hannah were outside, riding their bikes and laughing with two other kids from school. The other boy was tall and blond, wearing a white shirt and gray pants, just like Liam's usual outfit. The girl had light brown hair and wore a jeans jacket and jeans pants, just like Hannah. Mark recognized them as Liam and Hannah's classmates. As the kids rode closer, Mark smiled and waved. Liam waved back, but the other boy stopped for a moment and looked at Mark with a curious expression. "Hey, is that the guy building your house?" he asked Liam. Liam shrugged and looked away. "Yeah, that's just the worker my mom hired." The girl giggled. "He's not your real dad, right?" Liam didn't answer. Hannah came up and put her bike down beside Mark's toolbox. She didn't look at him. "He's just the guy who's fixing stuff," she said quietly. Mark stood still, feeling a tightness in his chest. He wanted to say something, to tell them that he was more than just a worker, but the words stuck in his throat. He didn't want to cause trouble. "Hey, I'm just finishing up some things. Want to come see the treehouse?" he asked, trying to change the subject. Liam and Hannah looked at each other and then back at Mark. Liam nodded slowly. "Okay." Mark led them to the backyard where the treehouse was nearly finished. He showed them the wooden stairs and the small windows. "I made this just for you guys," he said, smiling. Hannah touched the railing and said, "It's cool." Liam looked up and said, "Thanks." Mark felt a small spark of hope. Maybe it wasn't too late. The other kids stayed outside and watched from a distance. After a few minutes, they waved goodbye and rode away. Mark stayed with Liam and Hannah a little longer, talking about school and plans for the summer. The kids started to relax, laughing and sharing stories. Melissa came out with lemonade and snacks. "Looks like you're making progress," she said, smiling at Mark. "Yeah," Mark replied. "But there's still work to do." That night, after dinner, Mark sat quietly in the living room. Liam and Hannah were in their rooms, and Melissa was cleaning up. He thought about what the kids said earlier, how they saw him only as a worker. It hurt, but it didn't stop him. He wanted to be part of their lives, to be their family. He promised himself he would keep trying. He would build more than just a house. He would build trust, respect, and maybe one day, love. Until then, he would keep showing up, one day at a time. Mark spent the next few days working on the inside of the house. He installed shelves in the living room and built a special reading nook near the big window. He hoped Hannah would like it. She loved books and always needed a quiet place to read. One afternoon, Melissa came by with the kids after school. Liam was still wearing his white shirt and gray pants, looking tired but happy. Hannah's jeans jacket was a little dirty from playing outside. Mark was sanding the last coat of paint on the bookshelf when they arrived. "Hey," he said, setting his tools down. "Want to see the reading nook?" Hannah's eyes lit up. "Really? You made that for me?" Mark smiled. "Yeah, just for you." She ran over and sat down, touching the cushions he had placed inside. "It's perfect." Liam stood back, watching quietly. Melissa thanked Mark and told the kids to start unpacking their things. They still didn't have all their furniture, but the house was starting to feel like home. Later that evening, Mark helped Liam with his homework. They sat at the kitchen table, which was still a bit rough but sturdy. Liam worked on a math problem while Mark explained patiently. "This one's tricky," Mark said, "but if you break it down step by step, it's easier." Liam looked up at him, surprised by how helpful Mark was. "Thanks." Mark nodded. "Anytime." Hannah came in, holding a broken bike chain. "Can you fix this?" she asked. Mark took the chain and looked it over. "Sure thing. Give me a minute." He went outside to grab his tools and sat on the porch, working carefully to fix the chain. When he was done, Hannah smiled and said, "You're really good at this." Mark felt a warmth inside. Small moments like this made the hard days worth it. The next morning, Melissa and the kids left for school and work. Mark stayed behind, checking his list of tasks for the day. As he worked, he thought about how the kids had started to trust him a little more. They didn't call him Dad yet, but they smiled around him more. Liam even asked for help without hesitation. Hannah wasn't glued to her phone all the time anymore. Mark knew it would take time, but these were good signs. Around midday, a neighbor walked over and asked, "Is this your house?" Mark nodded. "Yeah, I'm building it." The neighbor smiled and said, "You're doing a great job. It looks beautiful." Mark thanked him, feeling proud. That evening, Melissa sat beside Mark on the porch. "The kids are coming around," she said softly. Mark looked at her and nodded. "I hope so." She smiled. "You're not just the builder anymore. You're family." Mark wanted to believe that. He knew the road was still long, but with every nail and every moment spent together, he was closer to becoming the stepfather the kids needed. And for now, that was enough. Moving day arrived faster than Mark expected. The house was finally ready. The walls were painted, the floors cleaned, and the rooms arranged. Boxes sat in every corner, waiting to be unpacked. Mark wore his pale orange vest and carried a small tool bag one last time before the job was done. Liam and Hannah raced through the rooms, calling out which one would be theirs. Liam, in his white shirt and gray pants, ran straight to the biggest bedroom. Hannah, still in her jeans jacket and jeans pants, picked the smaller room near the back. Melissa watched with a soft smile. "It's finally our home," she said, holding Mark's hand. Mark looked around, feeling proud and tired. This house was more than wood and nails. It was a dream he helped build. Later that afternoon, some neighbors came by to say hello. They were curious about the new family. One neighbor, a woman with a gentle voice, asked Liam, "Who built your house?" Liam looked at her and said, "Some builder my mom hired." Mark was close enough to hear. He felt the words like a quiet sting. He wanted to say, "I built it for all of us," but he stayed silent. Melissa noticed his face and gave him a quick squeeze on the shoulder. That evening, the family sat on the porch. The sun was setting, and the sky glowed orange. Liam and Hannah seemed quieter than usual. Mark asked Liam about school. "How was your first day in the new house?" Liam shrugged. "It was okay." Hannah looked at Mark and said, "Thanks for fixing the bike. It still works." Mark smiled. "Anytime." After the kids went to bed, Mark and Melissa cleaned the last boxes. Melissa asked, "Do you want to talk about what Liam said today?" Mark shook his head. "Not really. I know it's going to take time." Melissa nodded. "They just need to see you more. not just as the builder. Mark agreed. He hoped the kids would feel the same soon. The next morning, Mark took a quiet drive to clear his head. He thought about the long days on the construction site, the late nights, and the small moments with the kids. He wanted to be more than just the man who built their house. He wanted to be someone they could trust, someone they call family. When he came back, Melissa was waiting with a warm smile. "We're going to make this work," she said. Mark smiled back. "Yeah, one day at a time." He knew the house was finished, but the work to build a family was just beginning. And he was ready to keep trying. A few days after moving in, Mark noticed something different about the house. The rooms felt quieter. Liam and Hannah spent more time in their own spaces, and the energy that usually filled the house was softer. Mark kept busy fixing small things: a loose doorknob, a squeaky floorboard, a window that didn't close right. One afternoon, Melissa came home early from work. She found Mark sitting on the porch steps, staring at the front yard. "Hey," she said softly, "what's on your mind?" Mark looked at her and sighed. "I just wish Liam and Hannah saw me differently, not just as the guy who built the house." Melissa sat beside him. "They're kids. It takes time." Mark nodded but said nothing. The silence between them felt heavy. That evening, dinner was quieter than usual. Liam pushed his food around his plate, and Hannah didn't speak much. Melissa tried to start a conversation, but the kids seemed distant. After dinner, Mark went outside to get some fresh air. He walked around the yard, thinking about how hard he worked to build this home. He wanted more than walls and furniture. He wanted connection. The next morning, Melissa brought the kids to the construction site where Mark still kept some tools and leftover materials. "Hey, wanna help me with something?" Mark asked. Liam and Hannah looked at each other and then nodded. Mark handed Liam a hammer and nails. "I'm making a small bench here. Want to help?" Liam hesitated but took the hammer. Mark showed him how to hold it and gently guided his hands. Hannah helped by passing tools and holding the wood steady. For the first time in a while, the kids smiled and laughed while working together. Mark felt a small warmth in his chest. "This is fun," Liam said. Mark smiled. "See, working with your hands can be cool." Melissa watched from a distance and felt hope. Over the next few days, Mark and the kids built the bench together. They talked about school, friends, and summer plans. The simple project gave them something to share, a connection beyond words. One afternoon, Liam said quietly, "Thanks for teaching me." Mark looked at him and nodded. "Anytime." The kids still didn't call him Dad, but their actions showed they were starting to accept him. Mark knew it wasn't a quick fix. It would take patience and many small moments like these. But for now, he was okay with that. He was no longer just the guy in the pale orange vest building their house. He was becoming someone they could trust, someone who cared. And that was a start. It was a weekend, and the sun was bright. Mark was working outside, finishing the last touches on the garden fence. He wore his pale orange vest, and his short black curly hair was damp from the heat. Liam and Hannah were playing nearby, kicking the soccer ball back and forth. Mark called out, "Hey, want to help me paint the fence?" Liam, in his white shirt and gray pants, stopped and looked at Mark. Hannah, still in her jeans jacket and jeans pants, put down her phone and nodded. "Okay," Liam said, walking over. Mark handed them brushes and cans of paint. "Let's make it look nice together." As they painted, Mark talked about his own childhood. "When I was your age, I helped my dad paint our fence. It wasn't fun at first, but after, it looked amazing." Liam smiled a little. "Maybe this will be fun too." Hannah laughed. "Yeah, especially if we don't get paint on our clothes." Mark chuckled. Paint on clothes is part of the job. They worked side by side, chatting and laughing. Mark noticed how the kids started to relax around him more. Liam even shared a story about school, something he hadn't done in weeks. After a while, Melissa came outside with cold drinks. She watched the three of them and felt grateful. "See," she said to Mark, They're warming up. Mark nodded. I hope this keeps going. That night, after the kids went to bed, Melissa asked Mark if he wanted to watch a movie. They sat on the couch, tired but happy. Mark thought about how far they had come. The house was finished, the garden was growing, and most important, the kids were opening up. He knew challenges would come, but moments like this made everything worth it. The next day, Liam asked if Mark could help him with a school project. Hannah invited him to watch a movie with her. Mark smiled to himself. Maybe soon they would stop seeing him as just the worker. Maybe they would see him as family. He was ready to keep building. Not just walls, but trust and love. And that was the best project of all. It was a quiet Sunday morning. Mark sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee. The sun poured through the window, lighting up the room. Liam was at the table too, doing homework. Hannah sat on the couch, reading a book in the reading nook Mark had built just for her. Melissa brought pancakes from the stove. Everyone hungry? She asked. Liam nodded and said, "Thanks for helping with my project yesterday, Mark." Mark smiled. "Anytime, Liam." Hannah looked up from her book and said, "Thanks for making this nook. It's my favorite spot now." Mark felt something warm inside. These words meant more than he could say. After breakfast, Melissa went to work, and Mark decided to take the kids to the park. They walked together, laughing and talking about their plans for the summer. At the park, Liam kicked a soccer ball around, and Hannah climbed the jungle gym. Mark watched, feeling proud. Then, Liam came over and said quietly, "Mark, can I call you Dad?" Mark blinked, surprised. "If you want to," he said carefully. Liam smiled. "I think I do." Hannah joined them and said, "Me too." Mark's heart swelled. He knew it wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about the family they were building together. As the sun set, they sat on a bench, watching the colors change in the sky. Mark looked at Melissa and the kids and thought about everything they had been through. The hard days, the quiet moments, the small victories. He felt grateful. This was their home now, built with sweat, patience, and love. And finally, he was no longer just the worker. He was family.